Human activities, such as burning fossil fuels, are warming Earth's climate. The climate crisis has widespread ramifications. Ecologists are worried that many species will become extinct because they might not be able to adapt to a climate change that's faster than most naturally occurring ones. It's possible that some plants and animals could adapt by shifting their habitats towards Earth's poles or towards higher elevations to avoid the heat. Since ecosystems are varied and complex, ecologists can only find out by studying many specific cases. A team of American ecologists explored this possibility for a species of hummingbirds native to North America's west coast, called Anna's hummingbird. The researchers published their findings in 2022. Anna's hummingbirds live in California's lowlands, but migrate upslope into the cooler mountains during the summer. If climate warming continues, the team hypothesized, the birds might adapt by migrating farther up. To test whether this was really possible, the researchers studied the effects of relocating a group of Anna's hummingbirds to a higher altitude. They captured the birds from across their normal range in the Sierra Nevada and moved them to a research station near a mountain peak, 4,000 feet higher than the birds normally venture. They found that the hummingbirds had big difficulties adapting to the lower air pressure and oxygen levels, which caused a drop in their metabolic rate and flight efficiency. Although the researchers still want to study the effects of longer exposure, their tentative conclusion was that it would be hard for the birds to adapt. Their results remind us how complicated an animal's environmental requirements are. Man's best friend has long worked alongside humans to guard, hunt, and herd. New research suggests that over thousands of years, some dogs got bigger due to the nature of their job. As important managers of livestock, early canines doubled in size to protect their flocks from predators. A study of ancient canine bone fragments and teeth in Croatia determined that 8,000 years ago, Neolithic farmers immigrated to the area with their furry friends in tow. This early breed weighed a little over 30 pounds. 2 millennia later, at the start of the Bronze Age, dogs averaged about 40 pounds. By the Roman period, 2,000 years ago, dogs clocked in at more than 50 pounds. In other words, dogs went from the size of a large beagle to the size of a husky. That's a major growth in just 6,000 years. The increased size wasn't happenstance. Villages were becoming bigger, needing more land to grow crops. This meant livestock were pastured further from villages, often in the mountains. So, dogs' job responsibilities expanded as well. They not only had to travel long distances, they had to scare off hungry bears and wolves. Farmers, wanting the best guardians for their herds, selectively bred their dogs to be larger. Speaker 1: Yes, it's funny you should mention Merwin. Until about a year ago, I thought England was the only country that had a poet laureate. After all, it's a pretty odd job, isn't it? No salary to speak of and just a barrel of wine or something as payment. But he was or is the American poet laureate, isn't he? Speaker 2: That's right, but quite a few other countries have one too. Speaker 1: I know, I looked into it a bit. Other countries in the UK for a start, Wales, as you'd expect, with their Eisteddfods and long poetic tradition, and Ireland and Scotland. I think some places that were colonies or are in the Commonwealth have them, Canada, for example. And who's that wonderful Caribbean poet, Ern, the one that wrote Omros? Speaker 2: Derek Walcott. Speaker 1: That's him. He was the poet laureate of St. Lucia. But what about the rest of Europe? Don't the French have such a thing? Speaker 2: No, I don't think so. They've got the Academy, and you get elected to that if you're considered the best in your field. But I think Germany might have. No, it wasn't Germany. Somewhere else, but I don't remember. By the way, you're a bit behind the times in thinking what they get paid is a barrel of wine. All that changed long ago, but one of the more recent ones asked to have it back. There are some 250 million cars in America, 250 million cars in the country with just over 300 million people. And most of those vehicles, of course, are gas-powered. This poses a huge challenge given the limited supplies of oil and the growing urgency of the global warming crisis. But there is good news, according to our guests today. And that is we have the know-how and the technology to build sleek, fast automobiles that don't use gasoline. These vehicles of tomorrow are powered by hydrogen, electricity, biofuels, and digital technology. And they already exist. So what's stopping us from putting them on the roads? Our guests today will help answer that. These two paintings, both called Sunflowers, are generally accepted as the finest of several depictions of the thick-stemmed, nodding blooms that Van Gogh made in 1888 and 1889 during his time in Arles. The first is now in the collection of the National Gallery in London, and the second is in the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. Van Gogh referred to this work as a repetition of the London painting. But art historians and curators have long been curious to know how different this repetition is from the first. Should it be considered a copy, an independent artwork, or something in between? An extensive research project conducted over the past 3 years by conservation experts at both the National Gallery and the Van Gogh Museum has concluded that the second painting was not intended as an exact copy of the original example, said Ella Hendricks, a professor of conservation and restoration at the University of Amsterdam, who was the lead researcher on the project. For many years, the favorite horror story about abrupt climate change was that a shift in ocean currents could radically cool Europe's climate. These currents, called the overturning circulation, bring warm water and warm temperatures north from the equator to Europe. Before the Affordable Care Act came along, 80% of Americans had quality health insurance, like my wife and I, through their employer or through government programs like Medicare or Medicaid. For some, this insurance was far from ideal, as it featured high costs and a limited choice of providers. But overall, this was substantive coverage which enrollees were by and large satisfied. On the other hand, the other 20% of Americans were either uninsured or faced the prospect of buying insurance in the unstable and discriminatory non-group insurance market. This is a market where it was totally legal for insurers to discriminate against the sick for any reason. Insurers could deny the sick coverage, they could charge them much more than the healthy for insurance, or they could exclude their pre-existing illnesses from coverage. As a result, if you were healthy, you could get health insurance. This defeats the whole notion of health insurance. Health insurance is supposed to protect you against financial risk, not protect your insurance company against the sick. And as a result, people in this market were just one bad gene or one bad traffic accident away from bankruptcy. There's growing alarm over plunging insect populations with climate change, habitat destruction, and pesticides, all thought to play a role. But now, scientists say there's another culprit: artificial streetlights. Researchers from the charity Butterfly Conservation counted caterpillars at the sides of brightly lit roads. Compared with similar stretches of unlit roads, caterpillar numbers were reduced by half, suggesting streetlights can affect the abundance of insects, at least on a local scale. The scientists say with insects in trouble, we should be doing all we can to reduce negative influences. But there are practical solutions such as dimming streetlights in the early hours, installing motion sensors, or using color filters to modify the light. Nature's instruments for survival can be a godsend until they begin to affect us in destructive ways. Someone's negative characteristics can cloud their favorable traits to such an extent that we cannot see the positive anymore. In our biased minds, this person has become purely evil. It's pretty difficult not to feel repulsed by someone who doesn't have any positive traits, let alone forgive them. So, we might want to look beyond the vast specter of negativity and see that the people we resent are also carrying good within them, and that it's human to possess both evil and In order to study the effects that climate change and pollution have on the environment, long-term monitoring of the environment is necessary. One of the most important natural environments so never thought of: the coral reefs. However, monitoring the fish population and biodiversity is still a challenging task. Data collection in this kind of environment is labor-intensive, requiring divers to count the fish species in a certain area in recent years. Digital video recording has become much cheaper, which makes underwater cameras a good alternative for data collection. Furthermore, automatic video processing and pattern recognition are able to process this kind of data. This paper describes an entire system which is being developed to allow marine biologists to analyze large amounts of video data for long-term monitoring purposes. To give an indication of the challenges in this project, summary is given of the amount of data that the system is expected to process at the moment. Around 10 cameras record 12 o'clock hours daylight, with some have already recorded over 4 years. The estimated amount of raw video DEC 2 is at the moment 112 terabytes. By processing this data using automatic video processing software, we expect to find around 1,010 fish, which will also be categorized by species or family. All this data will be stored in a database which is expected to take up to 500 gigabytes. Besides processing all this data, it will also be a challenge to present the state to marine biologists in a usable manner. A non-governmental organization, NGO, is an organization that is neither a part of a government nor a conventional for-profit business. Usually set up by ordinary citizens, NGOs may be funded by governments, foundations, businesses, or private persons. Some avoid formal funding altogether and are run primarily by volunteers. NGOs are highly diverse groups of organizations engaged in a wide range of activities, and take different forms in different parts of the world. Some may have charitable status, while others may be registered for tax exemption based on recognition of social purposes. Others may be fronts for political, religious, or other interests. The number of NGOs in the United States is estimated at 1.5 million. Russia has 277,000 NGOs. India is estimated to have had around 2 million NGOs in 2009, just over 1 NGO per 600 Indians, and many times the number of primary schools and primary health centers in India. NGOs are difficult to define, and the term NGO is rarely used consistently. As a result, there are many different classifications in use. The most common focus is on orientation and level of operation. Relationship between the fault lines in the Earth's crust and an earthquake. This dislocation of the rock occurs from the Earth's surface, some kilometers to several hundred kilometers vertically down to the crust. The earthquake's focus is called the epicenter, which is vertically beneath the interior of the Earth's crust, and the energy releases and transfers through epicenter. The faults are the fracture on the Earth's crust. The position of the epicenters can be identified by the faults map, looking down from the center of the Earth. It will result in a seismic wave which is decreased as it moved away from the epicenter. They were struggling last year to make their services paid. The scientists are always asking the government for more money. There is a pharmacy on campus near the bookstore. Tours operate all year around, but the busiest dry season runs from May.